When famous K-pop superstar Jungkook visits his nephew Zach's middle school for career day, the school bully dares him to perform in the upcoming talent show as a joke. To everyone's shock, Jungkook accepts the challenge. Zach is horrified. His famous uncle is about to embarrass himself and ruin Zach's already shaky social life. What Zach doesn't know is that his uncle has kept a special talent hidden from the world for decades. As the big night approaches, news reporters gather, and the show is moved to a larger venue. The pressure builds. Zach discovers his uncle's secret ability but wonders, can Jungkook really impress an auditorium full of students, parents, and news cameras with this long-buried skill? And what mysterious promise from Jungkook's past is about to change lives around the world? And now for our final guest speaker on Career Day, please welcome Mr. Jungkook. Principal Donovan's voice boomed through the microphone as she gestured toward the side of the stage. The middle school auditorium erupted with excited whispers and the rapid tapping of fingers on phone screens as the famous K-pop superstar stepped into view. 12-year-old Zach Parker sank lower in his seat, pulling his hoodie tighter around his face. While the other kids buzzed with excitement, Zach wished he could disappear. Having a super famous uncle was supposed to be cool, but today it just made him the center of unwanted attention. "Dude, your uncle is actually here," Mason whispered, poking Zach in the ribs. "Why didn't you tell us he was coming?" "I didn't know," Zach muttered. It was true. His mom had mentioned Uncle Jungkook might stop by for dinner sometime this week while he was in town for a music collaboration. But showing up at Career Day? That was a surprise. Uncle Jungkook walked across the stage in his typical stylish streetwear, dark jeans and an oversized designer hoodie, looking more like a fashionable college student than someone who sold out stadiums worldwide. He shook Principal Donovan's hand and took the microphone. "Thanks for having me," he said with a slight smile. "I heard my nephew goes to school here, and I thought it might be fun to stop by." Hundreds of heads swiveled toward Zach. He could feel his face burning hotter than stage pyrotechnics. For the next 20 minutes, Uncle Jungkook talked about his music career, answered questions about world tours, album production, and what it was like to perform for millions. Most questions were pretty normal, but then Principal Donovan pointed to the raised hand of Theo Winters. Zach's stomach dropped. Theo was the 8th grade class president, star of the basketball team, and the biggest show-off in school. He also loved finding new ways to make Zach's life miserable. "Yes, you in the blue shirt," Uncle Jungkook said, pointing to Theo. Theo stood up with a confident smile. "Mr. Jungkook, everyone knows you're amazing at singing and dancing, but I'm wondering, is there anything you're actually bad at?" A few snickers rippled through the audience. Principal Donovan frowned and reached for the microphone, but Uncle Jungkook waved her off. "That's a good question," he said thoughtfully. "I'm terrible at plenty of things. I can't cook very well, I'm not great at video games, and despite being Korean, I never got good at traditional calligraphy." The students laughed, but Theo wasn't finished. "So basically, you're saying you're not good at normal people stuff," Theo pressed. "Like, I bet you wouldn't last 5 minutes in our school talent show next week." The auditorium went silent. Principal Donovan stepped forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Theo, that's enough. Mr. Jungkook is our guest." "And no, it's fine," Uncle Jungkook interrupted, a strange glint in his eye. "Tell me about this talent show." Principal Donovan cleared her throat. "It's our annual spring talent showcase. Students perform, and the winner gets a small scholarship fund for future education." "And you think I wouldn't last 5 minutes?" Uncle Jungkook asked, looking directly at Theo. Zach wanted to disappear through the floor. Was his uncle actually getting into an argument with an 8th grader? Theo grinned widely. "No offense, sir, but global pop stars aren't exactly known for connecting with small school events. Unless you're hiding some amazing non-music talent, it might be kind of embarrassing." Several teachers gasped. A few students turned to look at Zach again, their expressions a mix of horror and fascination. Uncle Jungkook was quiet for a moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. Not his usual slight smile for cameras, but a full, genuine grin that Zach had only seen when his uncle was truly up to something. "You know what? You're right that stepping outside our comfort zones is hard, Uncle Jungkook said. So challenge accepted. I'll perform in your talent show. The auditorium exploded with noise. Students jumped to their feet, phones raised high to capture the moment. Principal Donovan looked like she might faint. And Zach felt like the world was ending. As the chaos continued, Uncle Jungkook made his way off the stage and down the aisle toward the exit. He paused when he reached Zach's row and leaned down. "Surprise," he said with a wink. "Looks like I'll be sticking around for a few more days. Dinner at your place tonight." Zach could only nod, too stunned to speak, as his uncle left. Theo called out from across the auditorium, "Better start practicing, Mr. Jungkook. Talent shows on Friday." The final bell rang 10 minutes later, but instead of rushing to the buses like normal, everyone swarmed around Zach. "Is your uncle really going to do it? What's his talent going to be? Can you get me his autograph?" Zach pushed through the crowd, desperate to escape. He had almost made it to the door when he felt a hand clamp down on his shoulder. He turned to find Theo standing there, surrounded by his usual group of friends. "Your uncle is pretty cool for accepting my challenge," Theo said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "But you might want to warn him. My dad's bringing a reporter friend from the local news. Would be a shame if the famous Jungkook made a fool of himself on camera. Wouldn't it?" Zach pulled away. "He's not going to make a fool of himself." "Really?" Theo raised an eyebrow. "What's his talent, then? Lip-syncing his own songs? Doing backup dancer moves? Or maybe he'll just stand on stage and count his streaming numbers?" Theo's friends laughed. Zach felt his hands clench into fists. "You don't know anything about my uncle. And apparently neither do you," Theo shot back. "Otherwise you wouldn't look so scared right now." Before Zach could respond, Mason appeared at his side. "Bus is leaving in 1 minute, Zach. We gotta go." Grateful for the rescue, Zach hurried out of the building with Mason. They barely made it onto the bus before the doors closed. "Your uncle is the coolest person ever," Mason said as they found seats near the back. "I can't believe he's going to be in the talent show. What do you think he'll do?" "I have no idea," Zach admitted, and that was exactly what worried him. When the bus dropped him off at home, Zach was surprised to see his uncle's sleek black SUV already parked in the driveway. He trudged up the front steps, dreading the conversation to come. Inside, he found his mom and Uncle Jungkook sitting at the kitchen table, deep in conversation. They both looked up when he entered. "There he is," Uncle Jungkook said cheerfully. "The reason I'm about to make my middle school talent show debut." Zach's mom laughed. "I still can't believe you agreed to this, Jungkook. You know these kids can be brutal judges. That's what makes it fun," Uncle Jungkook replied, taking a sip from his tea mug. "The higher the stakes, the more interesting the challenge." "It's not fun," Zach blurted out, dropping his backpack on the floor. "It's going to be a disaster." His mom and uncle exchanged glances. "Zach, honey, what's wrong?" his mom asked. "I thought you'd be excited." "Excited about what? Watching Uncle Jungkook get laughed at by the whole school? Theo set this whole thing up as a joke. Mom, he wants Uncle Jungkook to fail so everyone can laugh at him. And at me." Uncle Jungkook leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Is that what you're worried about? That I'll embarrass you?" Zach looked down at his shoes, unable to meet his uncle's eyes. "You don't understand. Theo already makes school hard enough for me. And now he's bringing a news reporter to watch whatever happens." "A reporter?" His mom frowned. "Jungkook, maybe this isn't such a good idea after all." Uncle Jungkook was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and walked over to Zach, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Zach, look at me," he said gently. Reluctantly, Zach raised his eyes. "You know what's the biggest mistake people make?" Uncle Jungkook asked. "They assume they know what others are capable of. They put people in boxes and never expect them to surprise them." A small, mysterious smile played on his lips. "This Theo kid thinks he knows what I can and can't do. He's in for a surprise." "But what are you going to do?" Zach asked. "The talent show is in 3 days." Uncle Jungkook's smile widened. That's for me to know and you to find out. But I promise you this, whatever happens on that stage, you won't be embarrassed. Trust me. Zack wanted to believe him, but as he watched his uncle return to the table, chatting easily with his mom about his new music collaboration, the knot in his stomach only grew tighter. Because the truth was, Zack had no idea what non-music talents his famous uncle might be hiding, or if he had any stage-worthy skills at all. All he knew was that in 3 days, either Theo Winters would be proven right, or Uncle Jungkook would pull off the surprise of a lifetime. And Zack wasn't sure which possibility scared him more. That night, Zack couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying Theo's smug face and his uncle's mysterious confidence. Around midnight, he crept downstairs for a glass of water and found the guest room lights still on, a thin line of brightness visible under the door. Zack hesitated, then knocked softly. "Come in," Uncle Jungkook called. Zack pushed the door open to find his uncle sitting cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by lyric sheets covered with scribbled notes. A laptop glowed softly beside him. "Can't sleep?" Uncle Jungkook asked, gathering up some papers. "No," Zack admitted. "I keep thinking about the talent show." Uncle Jungkook patted the edge of the bed. "Sit. Let's talk." Zack perched nervously on the corner of the mattress. "I think you should back out," he blurted. "Tell them you have an emergency comeback prep or something." Uncle Jungkook raised an eyebrow. "You want me to lie?" "Not lie, exactly. Just..." Zack struggled to find the right words. "You don't understand what Theo is like. He set this whole thing up to make you look bad." "So what if he did?" Uncle Jungkook asked calmly. "So what?" Zack stared at his uncle. "Don't you care if people laugh at you?" Uncle Jungkook folded his hands in his lap. "Zack, do you know how many people laughed at the idea of a K-pop group breaking into the global market? Or doubted we could top the charts in non-Asian countries? Or mocked our early performances?" Zack shrugged. "Probably a lot. More than a lot," Uncle Jungkook said, his voice quiet but intense. "Executives, critics, other artists. They all said our goals were impossible or naive. If I'd worried about looking foolish, none of those achievements would exist today." "But that's different," Zack protested. "Those are things you're good at. This is a talent show." Uncle Jungkook reached for his wallet on the nightstand and pulled something out. An old, worn photograph. He looked at it for a moment, his expression softening, then tucked it away before Zack could see what it was. "There was a time when I wasn't good at those things either," he said. "We all start somewhere, usually being not very good at the things we later master." Zack picked at a loose thread on the bedspread. "But you only have 3 days. A smile tugged at the corner of Uncle Jungkook's mouth. "Maybe that's all I need." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Uncle Jungkook leaned forward. "Let me tell you a story I don't share often. When I was a bit younger than you, training in Seoul, I became interested in something that the other trainees thought was uncool. They teased me relentlessly about it." "What was it?" Zack asked. Uncle Jungkook shook his head. "That's not important right now. What matters is what my vocal coach told me when I came to her crying one day. She said, 'Jungkook, fear of looking foolish is just fear of other people's opinions. And other people's opinions are the heaviest weights you can choose to carry.'" He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark neighborhood. "I nearly gave up on that interest because I was afraid of being mocked. But I kept at it, and later those same skills became surprisingly valuable to me." Turning back to Zack, he continued, "I'm not backing out of the talent show. Not because I need to prove anything to this Theo kid, but because this is a chance to show you something important about life." "What's that?" Zack asked. "That courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing it anyway." Uncle Jungkook sat back down on the bed. "So yes, I'm doing the talent show. And I'd like your help." Zack blinked in surprise. "My help? With what?" "I need to practice and I could use an honest audience." Uncle Jungkook's eyes twinkled. "Plus, you know the school better than I do. You can tell me what works and what doesn't." A mix of emotions swirled in Zack's chest. Worry, curiosity, and a small, growing spark of excitement. You're really going to do this, aren't you? I really am, Uncle Jungkook said. He looked at Zack seriously. The question is, are you with me or against me? Zack hesitated. The sensible part of him still screamed that this was a terrible idea. But another part, a part that had always secretly admired his uncle's boldness, whispered that maybe, just maybe, Uncle Jungkook really did have something up his sleeve. Fine, Zack said finally. I'll help you. But don't blame me when Theo and his friends start posting videos of whatever happens all over the internet. Uncle Jungkook laughed. Deal. He reached over to his laptop and closed it. Now go get some sleep. We start tomorrow after school. The next morning at breakfast, Zack's mom eyed them both suspiciously as Uncle Jungkook drank a strange-smelling herbal tea with honey. What exactly are you planning for this talent show? She asked. Uncle Jungkook and Zack exchanged glances. It's a surprise, they said in unison. At school, the news of Jungkook's talent show appearance had spread like wildfire. Teacher Zack had never even spoken to stop him in the hallway to ask if it was true. By lunchtime, a rumor was circulating that famous celebrities might show up to watch. Did you know the principal is selling extra tickets? Mason said, sliding his lunch tray next to Zack's. The show's been moved to the big auditorium at the high school because so many people want to come. Zack nearly choked on his milk. The high school? That place seats like 1,000 people. I know. It's going to be epic. Mason looked at Zack with wide eyes. So come on, you can tell me. What's your uncle going to do? I don't know, Zack lied, poking at his cafeteria pizza. You're a terrible liar, Parker, came Theo's voice from behind them. He sat down across from Zack, uninvited. But it doesn't matter. Whatever your uncle's planning, it won't be good enough. Why do you even care? Zack asked, finding a sudden surge of courage. What did my uncle ever do to you? Theo leaned forward. People like your uncle think they can do anything just because they're famous. I'm just making sure he knows he can't. With that, Theo stood and walked away, leaving Zack staring after him. That afternoon, as promised, Uncle Jungkook was waiting when Zack got home from school. The guest room door was closed, and a small handwritten sign had been taped to it. Rehearsal in progress. Enter at your own risk. Zack took a deep breath and knocked. It was time to find out exactly what his uncle was planning. Come in, called Uncle Jungkook's voice, and get ready to be surprised. Zack pushed open the door and stepped into the guest room. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. Maybe a guitar or a magic set, but the room looked surprisingly normal. Uncle Jungkook stood in the center, holding a tablet and a glass of water. Close the door, Uncle Jungkook said, glancing at his watch. We don't have much time. Zack shut the door behind him. Time for what? What are you going to do for the talent show? Uncle Jungkook set his tablet down on the dresser. First, I need you to promise me something. What happens in this room stays between us until the show. No telling your friends, your mom, or anyone else. Deal? Deal, Zack agreed, curiosity now fully taking over his anxiety. Good. Uncle Jungkook took a sip of water. Now, I understand the talent show normally has students doing things like playing instruments, dancing, or magic tricks. Is that right? Zack nodded. Yeah, mostly. Last year someone did a science experiment that made the gym smell like rotten eggs for a week. Uncle Jungkook chuckled. Well, I'm not doing that. He pulled the desk chair toward the middle of the room. Sit. I want your honest opinion. Zack sat down, his leg bouncing nervously. Opinion about what? Instead of answering, Uncle Jungkook tapped his tablet. Soft music began playing. Something Zack didn't recognize, with strings and a gentle, steady rhythm. Uncle Jungkook closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then, nothing could have prepared Zack for what happened next. His uncle, the famous K-pop superstar who performed for sold-out arenas, opened his mouth and began to play the piano. The notes weren't complex pop melodies. They sounded rich and classical, with intricate passages Zack had never heard him play before. But even more surprising than the classical style was the skill itself. Uncle Jungkook's playing was good, really good. fluid and emotional with a technical precision that somehow made it more impressive. It filled the small guest room completely. When the piece ended, Uncle Jungkook stopped playing, and the room fell silent. He looked at Zack expectantly. "Well?" he asked. Zack realized his mouth was hanging open. He closed it quickly. "That was... You can play piano?" "So it seems," Uncle Jungkook said with a small smile. "The question is it good enough for your talent show?" "Good enough." Zack stood up, gesturing wildly. "Uncle Jungkook, that was amazing. Where did you learn to play like that? What piece was that? Why haven't you ever told anyone you can play?" Uncle Jungkook held up a hand to slow Zack's flood of questions. "One at a time. Yes, I can play, and I used to do it a lot when I was younger. The piece is a Chopin nocturne. And I haven't told anyone because..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Because some things you keep just for yourself." Zack couldn't believe it. His uncle, the man constantly in the spotlight whose every performance made headlines, had a hidden talent that nobody knew about. "But why show it now?" Zack asked. "You could have just done something simple for the talent show. A dance number or something." Uncle Jungkook walked to the window and looked out, his back to Zack. "Because sometimes, Zack, the thing we're most afraid to share is the thing we most need to give." He turned back, his eyes more serious than Zack had ever seen them. "I've spent my whole adult life being the idol, the performer, the golden magne. And that's fine, I love those things. But there was a time when classical piano was just as important to me." He tapped his pocket where Zack suspected the mysterious photograph was kept. "I've been hiding this part of myself for too long." A burst of pride welled up in Zack's chest. His uncle wasn't just doing this to teach him a lesson or to impress a bunch of middle schoolers. He was doing something brave, something real. "So the talent show," Zack began, "is the perfect opportunity," Uncle Jungkook finished. "Low stakes, relatively speaking. Not a global broadcast or a concert tour. Just a school auditorium full of kids and parents, and a local news reporter," Zack reminded him. Uncle Jungkook waved dismissively. One small step for an idol, one giant leap for his image. They both laughed, and the tension that had been building since career day finally began to dissolve. "All right," Zack said, feeling excited for the first time. "What can I do to help?" For the next hour, Uncle Jungkook practiced the piece while Zack watched, offering suggestions about where to stand and how to move. Uncle Jungkook explained that he would play two pieces. The first, the Chopin nocturne he'd just played, and the second, a modern composition he'd written himself years ago but wouldn't reveal yet. "But how will people connect with classical music?" Zack asked. "Some kids might find it boring." "Music doesn't always need lyrics or beats to be understood," Uncle Jungkook replied. "Sometimes the feeling is enough." As they wrapped up the practice session, Zack felt a new worry forming. "Uncle Jungkook, what if people don't get it? What if they're expecting you to sing or dance, and instead you play a classical piece?" Uncle Jungkook squeezed Zack's shoulder. "Then they'll learn something new about expectations, won't they? Just like you did today." The next morning at school, Zack found himself walking with a lighter step. He still couldn't believe his uncle's hidden talent, but now at least he wasn't dreading the talent show with the same gut-wrenching fear. That is, until he rounded the corner to his locker and found Theo waiting for him. "Parker," Theo said, leaning against the metal lockers. "Got some inside info about your uncle's act yet?" "Nope," Zack lied, opening his locker and shoving his backpack inside. "Weird," Theo said, examining his fingernails casually. "Because my dad's friend at the local news says there's a rumor going around that your uncle is planning to play piano." He looked up sharply. "Jungkook playing classical piano? Can you imagine anything more pretentious?" Zack's heart hammered in his chest. How had they found out? He forced himself to shrug. "Sounds pretty cool to me." "Cool?" Theo laughed. "It sounds desperate, like he couldn't think of anything else. So he's just going to bore everyone to sleep on stage." He pushed off from the lockers. "They're setting up the sound system at the high school auditorium today. Hope your uncle's ready for his fancy notes to echo all the way across town when he fails. As Theo walked away, a quiet voice spoke from behind Zach. Don't listen to him. Zach turned to find a girl he didn't recognize standing there. She was small, with long dark hair and serious eyes behind round glasses. Excuse me, Zach said. I said don't listen to him, the girl repeated. That boy doesn't know what he's talking about. And you do, Zach asked more defensively than he intended. The girl smiled slightly. I know that people who try to make others feel small are usually small themselves. She held out her hand. I'm Mei Li. I just transferred here 2 weeks ago. Zach, he replied, shaking her hand awkwardly. Zach Parker. I know, Mei said. Everyone knows who you are now, thanks to your uncle. She glanced down the hall where Theo had disappeared. Is it true? Is your uncle really going to play piano at the talent show? Zach hesitated. He'd promised Uncle Jungkook he wouldn't tell anyone, but something about Mei's direct gaze made him want to trust her. I can't say, he answered carefully. Mei nodded, seeming to understand. My mother is a piano teacher, she said. She always says that music is the one true language everyone can feel, even if they don't understand the genre. Before Zach could respond, the bell rang, signaling the start of first period. I have to get to class, Mei said, adjusting her backpack. But tell your uncle I'll be cheering for him, no matter what he does. As she walked away, Zach stood there, strangely comforted by the words of this girl he'd just met. That afternoon, when Zach approached the guest room for another practice session, he paused outside the door. From within came the sound of his uncle's piano playing, strong, clear, and filled with emotion. For a moment, he just stood there listening through the door, wondering how he ever could have doubted his uncle. Then he knocked and entered, ready for another secret practice. Unaware that in just 2 more days, the whole world would discover what he now knew. Come in, Uncle Jungkook called. Zach entered to find his uncle frowning at his tablet, swiping through what looked like sheet music files. Everything okay? Zach asked. Uncle Jungkook glanced up. The sheet music for the second piece isn't right. The tempo markings are inconsistent, and the dynamics feel off. Zach set his backpack down. Can't you just play it by ear? For the first piece. Yes, but the second one needs the score to capture the nuances. Uncle Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, a rare sign of frustration. I could try to adjust it myself, but music notation software isn't exactly my specialty. Zach thought for a moment. Maybe I know someone who could help. Uncle Jungkook raised an eyebrow. Who? There's this new girl at school, Mei Li. I met her today. She mentioned her mom is a piano teacher. Uncle Jungkook looked skeptical. And you think this girl could help with the sheet music? I don't know, Zach admitted. But she seemed to know a lot about music, and she was nice. Not like Theo and his friends. Uncle Jungkook considered this. We're running out of time. Alright, talk to her tomorrow. But remember, this stays secret until the show. The next morning, Zach searched the hallways for Mei Li. He finally spotted her in the library during study hall, sitting alone at a table with headphones on, writing in a notebook. Hey, Zach said, sliding into the chair across from her. Mei looked up, surprised. She removed her headphones. Hello, Zach Parker. About what you said yesterday, about your mom being a piano teacher. Zach lowered his voice. Do you know a lot about music, too? Mei tilted her head slightly. I play piano and violin, and I help my mother transcribe and arrange music for her students sometimes. Why? Zach leaned closer. If I tell you something, will you promise to keep it a secret? Mei's eyes widened with interest, but she nodded solemnly. My uncle really is going to play piano at the talent show, Zach whispered. And he's actually really good. Your Uncle Jungkook can play classical piano? Mei asked, her voice hushed but excited. Yes, and it's amazing, Zach said earnestly. He learned when he was a trainee, but nobody knows about it, and now he's going to show everyone at the talent show. But he's having trouble with one of his scores. Mei's eyes lit up. I could help with that. My mother taught me how to use music notation software. Her excitement dimmed slightly. But why would your uncle trust me? He doesn't even know me. Zach hadn't thought that far ahead. Could you come to my house after school? You could meet him and maybe show him what you can do. May hesitated. I would need to ask my mother first. Of course, Zach said quickly. But please don't tell her why. It's supposed to be a surprise. May smiled. I can keep a secret. That afternoon, Zach paced nervously at the bus stop, waiting to see if Maylee would show up. Just when he thought she wasn't coming, he spotted her walking toward him, carrying a laptop bag along with her backpack. My mother said it was okay, she explained. I told her I was helping a friend with a project. On the bus ride to Zach's house, they chatted about school and discovered they shared a love of science fiction books. May had moved from Seattle after her parents' divorce and was still adjusting to her new school. It's hard being the new kid, she admitted. No one talks to me except the teachers. I'm talking to you, Zach pointed out. May laughed. Yes, but only because you need my help. That's not true, Zach protested, then realized she was teasing him. He grinned. Okay, maybe at first, but you seem cool. When they arrived at Zach's house, his palms were sweating. What if Uncle Jungkook didn't like May's ideas? What if she thought his playing wasn't as good as Zach believed it was? Mom, I'm home, Zach called as they entered. I brought a friend from school. Zach's mom appeared from the kitchen, looking pleasantly surprised. Hello there. I'm Laura Parker. This is Maylee, Zach said. She just moved here. Is Uncle Jungkook home? In the guest room as usual, his mom replied. He's barely left it since yesterday. What exactly is he working on in there? School project, Zach said quickly. Come on, May. He led her to the guest room door and knocked. Who is it? Uncle Jungkook called. It's me, Zach answered, and I brought someone who might be able to help with the music problem. A moment of silence followed. Then the door opened. Uncle Jungkook stood there, looking between Zach and May with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Uncle Jungkook, this is May, Zach said. Her mom is a piano teacher and she knows about editing sheet music. May, who had seemed so confident at school, now looked slightly intimidated. She clutched her laptop bag tighter and gave a small bow of her head. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Jungkook, she said quietly. Zach told me you need help with a musical score. Uncle Jungkook studied her for a moment, then stepped back to let them in. Call me Jungkook. And yes, I could use some help. But this has to stay absolutely confidential. I understand, May said, her voice growing more confident. I won't tell anyone. Inside the room, Uncle Jungkook explained the problem with the second piece's sheet music while May listened intently. She asked a few technical questions about key signatures and tempo markings that Zach didn't understand, then took out her laptop. May I see the original score and then hear you play it? She asked. Uncle Jungkook nodded. He pulled up the digital sheet music on his tablet, a complex, modern composition filled with dynamic markings and tempo changes. Then he sat at the portable keyboard he'd set up in the room and played along. His hands moved with fluid precision, translating the intricate notes into a beautiful, melancholic melody that built into something powerful and hopeful. When he finished, May was sitting very still, her eyes wide. That was profound, she whispered. Uncle Jungkook shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. The notation doesn't capture the emotional shifts in the bridge, and the tempo markings are inconsistent for some of the passages. May nodded. All business now. I can fix that. It will take me about an hour. She opened her laptop and began setting up her software. The piece itself, did you write it a long time ago? Uncle Jungkook admitted it was never meant for anyone else to hear. Well, it deserves to be heard, May said firmly. And with the right notation, it will be perfect. As May worked on the score, Uncle Jungkook continued practicing the first piece with Zach. Occasionally, May would look up and offer a suggestion about his hand positioning or pedal technique, which Uncle Jungkook accepted with surprising humility. My mother would say you need to relax your wrists more, May commented at one point. Let the weight of your arms do the work. Uncle Jungkook tried it and the sound immediately became richer. Your mother sounds like a good teacher, he said. May smiled sadly. She is. She misses teaching larger groups since we moved, though. She only has a few private students here. After about an hour, May called them over. I think it's ready. Listen. She played the synthesized version of the new score, which now had clearer phrasing, consistent dynamics, and better tempo transitions. When Uncle Jungkook played with it, the difference was remarkable. The music flowed naturally with emotional peaks and valleys perfectly captured. When they finished, all three sat in silence for a moment. "That's it," Uncle Jungkook said finally. "That's exactly what it needed." He looked at May with new respect. "Thank you." May ducked her head, pleased but embarrassed by the praise. "I just adjusted a few things. Your playing did the rest." As the practice continued, Zach watched his uncle and May work together, amazed at how quickly they had formed a connection through music. For the first time since the talent show challenge, he felt a spark of something new, not just relief that his uncle wouldn't embarrass himself, but actual excitement about what was to come. The talent show was only a day away now, and against all odds, Zach found himself looking forward to it. The next morning, Zach arrived at school to find a news van parked outside the main entrance. A reporter stood nearby, talking into a microphone while a camera operator filmed. "What's going on?" Zach asked Mason as they walked past. "Dude, haven't you checked social media?" Mason pulled out his phone and showed Zach a local news website. The headline read, "K-pop superstar to perform at local school talent show." Zach's stomach dropped. "This is getting out of control." "I know. It's awesome." Mason enthused, completely missing Zach's discomfort. "My parents are coming and they never come to school stuff. Everyone wants to see what your uncle's going to do." Inside the school, things were even worse. Principal Donovan stopped Zach in the hallway, her face flushed with excitement. "Zach, there you are. Do you think your uncle would mind doing a short interview with Channel 8 News before the show tomorrow? They're doing a special segment." "I'll have to ask him," Zach interrupted, trying to escape. Of course," she nodded vigorously. "And please let him know we've arranged special parking near the stage door of the high school auditorium. We wouldn't want him to be mobbed by fans." As she hurried away, Zach heard Theo's voice behind him. "Your uncle's got everyone fooled, doesn't he?" Zach turned to find Theo leaning against a row of lockers, a smug smile on his face. "What do you mean?" Zach asked. "I mean he's got the whole school thinking he's going to do something amazing," Theo said. "But my dad's friend at the news station says reliable sources confirm he's just going to play piano." He made air quotes around reliable sources, as if some pop star could actually play classical well enough to impress anyone. "Those reliable sources are wrong," Zach said firmly, surprising himself with his confidence. "My uncle's going to shock everyone tomorrow night." Theo's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." He pushed off from the lockers. "My dad invited some of his business friends, 2 important people. Hope your uncle doesn't mind an audience full of actual successful adults judging him." As Theo walked away, May appeared at Zach's side. "Don't let him get to you," she said quietly. "He's just jealous." "Jealous?" Zach looked at her in confusion. "Of what?" "Of you," May said simply. "You have a famous uncle who pays attention to you. Some people would do anything for that kind of connection." Zach had never thought of it that way before. "I guess." "How's the practice going?" May asked, changing the subject. "Good, I think. Thanks again for your help yesterday." Zach hesitated. Would you want to come over again today for the final practice?" May's face lit up. "I'd like that." Later that afternoon, Zach, Uncle Jungkook, and May gathered in the guest room for one last rehearsal. Uncle Jungkook looked tired but focused as he ran through both pieces multiple times. "You should rest your hands," May advised after the third run-through. "My mother says too much practice the day before a performance can strain your muscles." Uncle Jungkook nodded, taking a sip of his specialty tea. "You're right. I think we're as ready as we'll ever be. The whole school is talking about it," Zach said. "There was even a news van outside today." Uncle Jungkook winced. "I was afraid of that. One of my managers called this morning. Apparently, someone leaked that I'm participating in a middle school talent show and now it's becoming a bigger deal than I expected." "Are you nervous?" May asked. Uncle Jungkook thought for a moment. "Yes," he admitted. "But not about the audience size. I've performed in front of thousands of people before." He touched his pocket where Zach knew the mysterious photograph was kept. "It's more about sharing something personal." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Uncle Jungkook's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and frowned. "Problem?" Zach asked. "There's an issue with the music video shoot for my new single," Uncle Jungkook said, typing a response. "Nothing catastrophic, but I need to make some calls." As Uncle Jungkook stepped into the hallway with his phone, May turned to Zach. "He's really going to do it, isn't he? Even with all the pressure and attention?" "Looks like it," Zach said. "I just hope his hands hold up." Almost on cue, they heard Uncle Jungkook sigh heavily in the hallway. When he returned a few minutes later, he flexed his fingers. "Are you okay?" Zach asked, alarmed. Just a little stiffness, Uncle Jungkook said, but Zach noticed he was massaging his knuckles more than before. Nothing to worry about. May looked concerned. My mother has special hand exercises for pianists before performances. I could show you. That would be great, Uncle Jungkook said. And Zach? Could you run to the store for some hand warmers? I'm almost out. As Zach grabbed his jacket, he couldn't help worrying. What if Uncle Jungkook's hands cramped up completely? With news fans and business people and the whole school watching, it would be even more humiliating than if he'd never agreed to perform in the first place. On his way to the store, Zach passed the high school auditorium. Workers were unloading sound equipment and a large banner was being hung that read Spring Talent Showcase. The sight made his stomach twist with a fresh wave of anxiety. By the time he returned home with the hand warmers, May had already left, promising to bring her mother's exercise printouts in the morning. Uncle Jungkook was resting his hands, communicating through notes on his tablet. That night, as Zach tried to fall asleep, he could hear his mother and uncle talking in low voices downstairs. Are you sure you're up for this? His mom was asking. Your hands looked stiff earlier. Uncle Jungkook's response was too quiet to make out, but whatever he said made his mom laugh. Well, it's your funeral, she said. But Zach will be mortified if you freeze up like a statue on stage. Zach pulled his pillow over his head. Tomorrow was the big day, and despite his growing excitement earlier, his anxiety was back in full force. Everything, his uncle's reputation, his own social standing, and now apparently even Uncle Jungkook's health, hung in the balance. The talent show was less than 24 hours away. Zach woke to the sound of his phone buzzing with text messages. Squinting at the screen, he saw a dozen notifications from classmates asking about Uncle Jungkook's performance. He ignored them all and headed downstairs for breakfast. In the kitchen, his mom was making pancakes while Uncle Jungkook sat at the table, typing furiously on his laptop. He looked up when Zach entered and held a finger to his lips, then typed a note on his tablet, saving my hands. No playing today. Is your hand worse? Zach asked, concerned. Uncle Jungkook shrugged and typed, not better, not worse. Just being careful. May said she's bringing her mom's special exercises before school, Zach said, sliding into a chair. She texted me this morning. Uncle Jungkook gave a thumbs up and returned to his laptop. Zach's mom set a plate of pancakes in front of each of them. Eat up, she said. Big day today. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Uncle Jungkook's phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned, and stepped out of the room to take the call. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression was grim. He typed quickly on his tablet and showed it to Zach and his mom. Emergency at music video set. Need to go now. Might have to miss show. What? Zach blurted. But the talent show is tonight. His mom put a hand on his shoulder. Jungkook, how serious is it? Uncle Jungkook typed, director injured. Millions at stake. Need to oversee reshoot. Zach felt a confusing mix of emotions. Part of him was relieved no talent show meant no potential embarrassment. But another part, a surprisingly strong part, felt disappointed. After all their practice, after seeing how good his uncle really was, after May's help with the music, it would all be for nothing. I understand, Zach said quietly. It's okay. Uncle Jungkook studied him for a moment, then typed, sorry, Zach. Some things can't be helped. 10 minutes later, Uncle Jungkook was gone, driven away by a car that had arrived to take him to the airport. Zach stood in the driveway watching the car disappear around the corner, a hollow feeling in his chest. I'm sorry, honey, his mom said, giving him a quick hug before heading to work. I know you were starting to look forward to it. At school, Zach faced a barrage of questions about his uncle's performance. He gave the same answer to everyone. He had a work emergency and had to leave town. Most people looked disappointed but understanding. Theo, however, was triumphant. I knew he'd back out, he crowed during lunch. Too scared to embarrass himself in front of everyone. Zach didn't bother responding. What was the point? After school, he found Maylee waiting by his locker, holding a small folder of printed exercises. I brought the hand exercises, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. My mother made them fresh this morning. Where's your uncle? Zach's shoulders slumped. He had to leave. There was an emergency at his music video shoot. May's face fell. Oh, so he won't be performing tonight? Nope. Zach opened his locker and shoved his books inside with more force than necessary. Sorry you went to all that trouble for nothing. It wasn't for nothing, May said quietly. I enjoyed helping. It was the first time since moving here that I felt useful. Zach looked at her, really seeing the sadness in her eyes for the first time. I'm glad you helped too. It was cool working with you. They walked to the bus stop together, talking about the other acts that would be in the talent show. May mentioned she might still go to watch. No point now, Zach said as they climbed onto the bus. The only reason people were excited was to see my uncle. Maybe, May said. But it's still a chance to see what other students can do. When they arrived at Zach's stop, May surprised him by getting off too. I thought I'd walk you home, she explained. Since I still have these exercises and all. As they approached Zach's house, his phone rang. It was his uncle's number. Hello? Zach answered. Zach, Uncle Jungkook's voice sounded determined. I'm at the airport. The reshoot is being handled by my backup director. I'm coming back. You are. Zach couldn't hide his surprise. Some things are important enough to delegate, Uncle Jungkook said. My flight lands in 2 hours. Will you have someone pick me up? Yes. Zach felt a surge of excitement. Mom can do it or I'll get a rideshare. Good. And one more thing, is May with you? I could use those exercises. Zach looked at May, who was watching him curiously. Yeah, she's right here. Perfect. See you soon. After hanging up, Zach turned to May, grinning widely. He's coming back. The show is on. May's eyes widened. Really? He's flying back just for the talent show. Yes. Zach grabbed her hand without thinking. Come on. We need to get everything ready. As they ran up the driveway, Zach realized something important had changed. A week ago, he had dreaded the talent show with every fiber of his being. Now he couldn't wait. And it wasn't just because he knew his uncle would be amazing. It was because, somehow in preparing for this performance, he had found something unexpected, a new friend in Mei Lee and a new understanding of his famous uncle. No matter what happened on stage tonight, that was worth something. Little did he know just how much more was at stake than a middle school talent show. The high school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Every seat was filled and people stood along the walls at the back. News cameras were set up in several locations and a line of cars still snaked through the parking lot as latecomers rushed to find spots. Backstage, Zach paced nervously in the narrow hallway. Uncle Jungkook had texted that he was 5 minutes away, but the show was scheduled to start in 10. Principal Donovan kept popping her head around the corner, asking if the special guest had arrived yet. He'll be here, Zach assured her for the 5th time. His flight just landed a little late. Well, we can't hold the show for too long, Principal Donovan fretted. There are 12 other acts waiting and the news crews have time constraints. May, who had been given a special backstage pass as Uncle Jungkook's assistant, touched Zach's arm. Look, she whispered, pointing toward the stage door. Uncle Jungkook slipped through the entrance wearing a simple black shirt and pants. He looked tired from the flight but smiled when he saw them. Made it, he said. Sorry for the drama. You're here, that's what matters, Zach said, relief washing over him. He turned to Principal Donovan. See? Told you. The principal hurried over, practically bouncing with excitement. Mr. Jungkook, we're so honored. You're our closing act, of course, the grand finale. Can I get you anything? Water? A private room to prepare? Just some space to warm up would be fine, Uncle Jungkook replied politely. Of course, of course. She gestured to a small dressing room. This is all yours. The show starts in 5 minutes, you'll be on in about an hour. As she bustled away, Uncle Jungkook, Zach, and May slipped into the dressing room and closed the door. How are your hands? May asked immediately. Uncle Jungkook flexed his fingers. They're holding up. Not perfect, but it'll do. He set down his bag and rubbed his hands together. So, big crowd out there? The biggest they've ever had for a talent show, Zach confirmed. Everyone's here to see you. Something flickered across Uncle Jungkook's face, not exactly fear, but a kind of vulnerability Zach had never seen in him before. Are you nervous? Zach asked, surprised. Uncle Jungkook let out a short laugh. Of course I'm nervous. Aren't you nervous before tests or baseball games? Yeah, but you're... Zach gestured vaguely. You perform for millions. And none of that makes me immune to stage fright, Uncle Jungkook admitted. He sank into a chair in front of a small mirror. Especially for something like this. But you've done concerts in front of thousands of people, Zach protested. I've seen videos. Uncle Jungkook nodded. That's different. That's performing songs I've practiced 1,000 times with my team beside me. This... He pulled the worn photograph from his pocket and looked at it. This is personal. May approached cautiously. May I ask what that picture is? You look at it before every practice. Uncle Jungkook hesitated, then handed it to her. Zach moved closer to see it too. The photograph showed a much younger Uncle Jungkook, maybe 12 or 13, standing next to an elderly Korean man with a kind face and bright eyes. They were in what looked like a small music studio and both were smiling widely. That's Maestro Kim, Uncle Jungkook said softly. He was my first piano teacher in Seoul. one of the kindest men I've ever known. He believed in my hands when no one else did, including me. You had a piano teacher before becoming an idol? Zach asked, pieces suddenly falling into place. That's where you learned to play? Uncle Jungkook nodded. From ages 8 to 12. When I joined the trainee program, I had to focus on dance and vocals. Then idol life happened, debut, tours, albums. But you kept playing? May asked. Only for myself. In practice rooms late at night, in hotel rooms during tours. A small smile played on his lips. Sometimes when I needed to remember who I was before the fame. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Zach asked. You're really good. Uncle Jungkook shrugged. The world put me in a box labeled idol after a while. It seemed easier to stay there. He took the photo back, looking at it thoughtfully. Maestro Kim used to say, everyone has music in their hands, but not everyone has the courage to let others hear it. From outside the dressing room, they could hear the show beginning, the principal's voice welcoming everyone, followed by enthusiastic applause. Sounds like a full house, Uncle Jungkook remarked, his voice betraying a slight tremor. You'll be amazing, May said with firm confidence. Just remember what we practiced. For the next hour, they listened as the other performers took their turns on stage. There were piano solos, dance routines, a comedy skit, and even a surprisingly good magic act. The crowd seemed enthusiastic but restless, clearly waiting for the main event. 5 minutes, Mr. Jungkook, a stagehand called through the door. Uncle Jungkook stood and straightened his shirt. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking slow, deep breaths. Uncle Jungkook, Zach said hesitantly. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. No one would blame you if you changed your mind. His uncle opened his eyes and looked at Zach with surprise. Would you be disappointed if I backed out? The question caught Zach off guard. A week ago, he would have been thrilled if his uncle had canceled. Now, he realized with some surprise he actually wanted to see him perform. Yeah, Zach admitted. I would. But it's your choice. Uncle Jungkook smiled, a real smile, not the slight one he used for cameras. Then I'm doing it. For Maestro Kim. For myself. And for you. The stagehand knocked again. 2 minutes. I'll go find my seat, May said, giving Uncle Jungkook's arm a quick, encouraging squeeze. Remember, relaxed wrists, deep breaths, and focus on the back wall if the crowd makes you nervous. As she slipped out the door, Uncle Jungkook turned to Zach. Your friend is pretty amazing. Yeah, Zach agreed. She is. Mr. Jungkook. You're up. The stagehand appeared in the doorway looking nervous but excited. Uncle Jungkook took one last deep breath and tucked the photograph back into his pocket. Here goes nothing. As they walked toward the stage, Zach could see his mother in the front row sitting next to an empty seat saved for him. Theo and his family were a few rows back, the boys' face a mixture of curiosity and lingering smugness. News cameras pointed toward the stage, red lights blinking. Principal Donovan stepped up to the microphone. And now for our special guest performer, please welcome Jungkook. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Uncle Jungkook squared his shoulders, gave Zach a quick wink, and walked out onto the stage. Alone in the spotlight, he suddenly looked smaller, more human than the larger-than-life figure Zach was used to seeing in concert films. For a split second, Zach felt a flash of panic. What if everything went wrong? What if Uncle Jungkook's hands froze completely? But as the applause died down and a hush fell over the audience, Zach saw his uncle's posture change. He sat taller at the grand piano, just as May had instructed, and looked out over the crowd with quiet confidence. The moment of truth had arrived. The auditorium fell completely silent as Uncle Jungkook sat at the grand piano, center stage. The spotlight created a perfect circle of light around him, making him seem isolated from everything else. For several seconds, he didn't move or speak, and Zach's heart hammered in his chest. From his seat in the front row between his mom and May, Zach could see his uncle's face clearly. There was an unusual stillness to him, so different from his energetic concert performances. Uncle Jungkook's eyes briefly scanned the crowd, then he seemed to look past everyone, focusing on some distant point as May had suggested. The silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable. People began to shift in their seats, a few coughs echoed through the room. Near the back, someone whispered loud enough to be heard, "Is he frozen?" Zach noticed Theo smirking a few rows back, nudging his father and pointing. The news cameras remained fixed on Uncle Jungkook, their red lights glowing steadily. Principal Donovan stood off to the side of the stage, her smile becoming strained as the silence continued. Just when Zach thought he might need to do something, run up on stage, create a distraction, anything to save his uncle from this awkward moment, Uncle Jungkook closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, lifted his hands slightly above the keys, and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, the opening measures of the Chopin Nocturne. The melody was haunting and unfamiliar to ears expecting K-pop, with delicate phrasing that seemed to dance between notes in unexpected ways. Some of the younger kids in the audience giggled nervously at the serious music. Zack saw Theo's smirk widen and he felt a stab of worry. Had this been a mistake after all? But then something began to change. Jungkook's playing grew stronger, more confident with each phrase. The slight stiffness that had worried Zack earlier somehow added weight to the performance, making it sound raw and authentic. The intricate passages, which had initially seemed overly complex, now created a narrative that was mesmerizing. The giggles and whispers faded. People leaned forward in their seats. Even the news camera operators, who had been checking their watches moments before, were now fully focused on capturing every second. Jungkook's eyes remained closed as the piece built in intensity. His hands, which had moved precisely at first, now seemed to flow with the music, emphasizing certain emotional phrases. The style might have been classical, but the emotion behind it was universal, a melody that spoke of longing, of dedication, of memories carried through years of hidden practice. Zack glanced at Mei beside him. She sat perfectly still, her eyes shining with unshed tears. When she noticed him looking, she whispered, "It's beautiful." As the nocturne reached its final notes, Jungkook's playing softened again, the melody dissolving into a whisper that seemed to hang in the air even after he lifted his hands from the keys. For a heartbeat, the auditorium remained absolutely silent. Jungkook opened his eyes, looking almost surprised to find himself on stage in front of hundreds of people. Then, hesitantly at first, the applause began. It started in the back rows and rolled forward like a wave, growing louder as it spread. People weren't standing yet, they seemed too stunned for that, but the applause was genuine, appreciative. Zack saw his uncle take another deep breath. He seemed to sit taller now, more at ease. He nodded slightly to someone off stage, and soft lighting shifted to focus solely on him. "This second piece," Uncle Jungkook said, his speaking voice quiet but clear enough to be heard throughout the auditorium, "is something I wrote many years ago when I was first dreaming of music beyond what was expected of me." He closed his eyes again, and this time when he began to play his own composition, his hands were immediately stronger, more confident. The modern melody flowed like water, complex yet accessible, melancholic yet hopeful. The piece told a story without words, of reaching beyond boundaries, of pursuing hidden passions, of falling and rising again. It wasn't explicitly about fame or idle life, it could have been about any dream that required courage and authenticity. But coming from Jungkook with his well-known discipline training, it carried extra meaning. As he reached the emotional climax, his hands moved powerfully across the keys, drawing out rich, resonant chords that filled the auditorium. Zack was transfixed. This wasn't just good piano playing, this was something else entirely. His uncle wasn't performing, he was sharing something deeply personal, something that had clearly lived in his heart for years. The music might have been written by a younger Jungkook, but it still reflected the artist he had become. Around the auditorium, Zack noticed people wiping away tears. Even some of the teachers and parents who had seemed skeptical earlier were now watching with genuine emotion. Mei reached over and squeezed Zack's hand, her eyes never leaving the stage. Most surprising of all was Theo. The smirk had vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of bewilderment, and could it be respect? His father beside him looked equally stunned, his phone forgotten in his hand as he stared at the stage. As the piece approached its final, gentle resolution, Uncle Jungkook's playing grew softer again, more intimate, as if he were sharing a secret. The last notes faded into silence. Uncle Jungkook held the final chord with the sustained pedal, letting it resonate through the hall before lifting his hands. For a moment, he sat perfectly still, eyes closed, caught between performance and reality. Then the spell broke. The audience erupted. People leaped to their feet, applauding wildly, some cheering, others simply staring in amazement. The standing ovation was immediate and unanimous. Uncle Jungkook opened his eyes, looking momentarily startled by the reaction. A small, genuine smile spread across his face, not the practiced smile he used for concerts, but something more vulnerable and real. He gave a slight bow from his seat, then stood and looked directly at Zack for the first time since he'd begun playing. Even from the audience, Zack could see the question in his uncle's eyes. Was it okay? Zack was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands hurt, nodding vigorously, unable to contain his pride and amazement. Their eyes locked across the distance, and in that moment Zack felt he truly saw his uncle, not the famous idol, not the golden magne, but simply a person who had shared something precious and was hoping it had been received with kindness. The applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. Principal Donovan rushed onto the stage, her face flushed with excitement. She tried to speak into the microphone, but her words were lost in the continuing ovation. Uncle Jungkook shook her hand, gave one more small bow to the audience, and then walked off stage with the same quiet dignity with which he had arrived. "Come on," Zach said to May, grabbing her hand. "Let's go backstage." They pushed their way through the crowd, dodging reporters who were already broadcasting live reactions. Behind them, Zach could hear snippets of conversation. Who knew he could play like that? The man sings and composes classical? That second piece should be recorded professionally. Backstage was chaos, teachers, staff, and the other student performers crowded around the wings, all trying to catch a glimpse of Uncle Jungkook, who had disappeared into the dressing room. A security guard had positioned himself at the door, keeping everyone out. "That's his nephew," someone said, pointing at Zach. The guard stepped aside, allowing Zach and May to slip through. Inside, they found Uncle Jungkook sitting quietly, looking at the old photograph again. He glanced up when they entered, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "Well," he asked simply. "You were amazing." Zach burst out, unable to contain himself any longer. "Uncle Jungkook, that was the best thing I've ever heard. Everyone loved it, they're still clapping out there." May, more composed but equally enthusiastic, added, "Your technique was perfect. The way you controlled the dynamics despite your stiff hands, my mother would be so impressed." Uncle Jungkook smiled, tucking the photograph back into his pocket. Maestro Kim would have been proud. He always said music was meant to be shared. A knock at the door interrupted them. Principal Donovan poked her head in, beaming. "Mr. Jungkook, the audience is asking for an encore, and there are reporters waiting to interview you." Uncle Jungkook looked at Zach, raising an eyebrow in question. "It's up to you," Zach said, understanding the unspoken question. "But if you're asking me, I think you should go back out there." For a moment, Uncle Jungkook seemed to consider his options. Then he stood up, straightened his shirt, and headed for the door. "Maybe one more piece," he said with a smile. "For old time's sake." As he left the room, May turned to Zach, her eyes bright with excitement. "Your uncle is incredible. Not just the playing, but the courage to share something so personal." Zach nodded, a strange new feeling swelling in his chest. All his life, he had thought of his uncle as someone separate from him, a famous figure who happened to be related, someone whose accomplishments were untouchable and whose life was nothing like his own. But tonight, something had changed. He had seen a different side of Uncle Jungkook, a more human side, and somehow it made him feel more connected to him than ever before. "Come on," he said to May. "Let's go watch the encore." As they headed back toward the auditorium, Zach spotted Theo standing awkwardly by the water fountain. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Zach expected another smug comment or challenge. Instead, Theo gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "Your uncle," Theo said, his voice lacking its usual edge, "is pretty cool after all." It wasn't quite an apology, but Zach would take it. He nodded back and continued toward the auditorium where the crowd was still on its feet, waiting for more. The moment of truth had passed, and it had exceeded everyone's expectations, especially Zach's. The next morning, Zach woke to the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. Groggily, he reached for it and found dozens of notifications, texts from classmates, social media alerts, and news alerts. He sat up, suddenly wide awake, and opened the first link. There on his screen was a video clip titled "K-pop Superstar Stuns Audience with Incredible Piano Performance." The thumbnail showed Uncle Jungkook at the piano, captured mid-performance. The view counter already showed over 2 million views. More scrolling revealed headlines like "The Hidden Talent of Jungkook" and "From Idol to Virtuoso, Jungkook Reveals Classical Gift." One local news site had the headline, "Middle School Talent Show Becomes International Sensation Overnight." "Zach, breakfast," his mom called from downstairs. In the kitchen, Zach found his mother and Uncle Jungkook sitting at the table. His uncle looked surprisingly relaxed, sipping tea and reading something on his tablet. "Morning, superstar," his mom said with a grin. "Have you seen the news?" "Some of it," Zach replied, sliding into a chair. "Looks like Uncle Jungkook's famous for a whole new reason now." Uncle Jungkook chuckled. "Fame comes and goes. The internet has a short attention span. But everyone loved it." Zach protested. "All the comments say you should record a classical album or something." "Maybe someday," Uncle Jungkook said with a mysterious smile. "For now, I have a world tour to finish and new music to create." Zach's phone buzzed again, a text from Mason. "Dude, your uncle is trending worldwide. When did he learn to play like that?" "So, what happens now?" Zach asked, looking up from his phone. Uncle Jungkook set down his tablet. "Now, I fly back to Seoul this afternoon to finish that music video. Life goes on. But that's it." Zach couldn't hide his disappointment. "You're just going to go back to normal life after last night?" His uncle looked at him thoughtfully. different has already happened. Just not in the way you might think. Before Zach could ask what he meant, the doorbell rang. His mom went to answer it, returning a moment later with May and an elegant woman who could only be her mother. "Look who's here," his mom announced. Uncle Jungkook stood up, extending his hand to May's mother. "You must be Mrs. Chin. Your daughter has been a tremendous help." Mrs. Chin shook his hand, her expression composed but her eyes bright with interest. "My daughter couldn't stop talking about your performance last night. I'm sorry I missed it." "Mom's a piano instructor," May explained to Zach. "She's worked with professional musicians in Seattle." "I brought you something," Mrs. Chin said, offering Uncle Jungkook a small jar. "A special herbal balm, more effective than what I sent yesterday for hand stiffness." "Thank you," Uncle Jungkook said, accepting the gift. "Your daughter has quite an ear for music. The adjustments she made to my score were perfect." Mrs. Chin smiled proudly at May. "She has always had a gift?" Her smile faded slightly. "Since the divorce, it's been harder for her to pursue her music. New city, new school." "Mom," May whispered, looking embarrassed. Uncle Jungkook seemed to consider something for a moment. "Mrs. Chin, do you have any interest in teaching master classes? My agency is launching a program for young musicians and we've been looking for instructors with your credentials." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. Yes, I would be very interested." "Excellent. My assistant will contact you next week to discuss details." Uncle Jungkook turned to May. "And perhaps you would consider helping as a junior mentor? We need someone who understands both classical training and, well, what it's like to be a student today." May's face lit up. "Really? Yes, I'd love to." Zach watched this exchange with amazement. In just a few sentences, his uncle had potentially changed the lives of May and her mother. He did it so casually, as if arranging opportunities was as simple as ordering tea. After May and her mother left with promises to stay in touch, Zach helped his uncle pack his things for the flight back to Seoul. "That was really nice, what you did for May and her mom," Zach said as he handed Uncle Jungkook his laptop charger. "It's not charity," Uncle Jungkook replied. "They have real talent. The program will benefit from their skills." Still, Zach hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him since breakfast. "What did you mean earlier about different already happening?" Uncle Jungkook paused in his packing and sat on the edge of the bed. He pulled out the now familiar photograph of himself with Maestro Kim and looked at it thoughtfully. "When I was about your age," he began, "piano was my refuge. It was the one place where I didn't have to think about being a trainee, about constant evaluations, about the pressure to be perfect. Maestro Kim saw that in me and nurtured it. He told me once that music would help me find my true voice, not just for performing, but for life." He turned the photograph over. On the back, Zach could see faded handwriting. "His last words to me before I entered intensive idol training were, 'Someday, when you least expect it, your hands will be needed again to bridge worlds and change hearts.' I never quite understood what he meant until last night." "Because you played classical and your own composition?" Zach guessed. Uncle Jungkook smiled. "That's part of it. But there was something more happening in that auditorium. Did you notice how quiet everyone got? How they leaned forward? For a few minutes, they weren't watching Jungkook the idol. They were just listening to a person sharing something real." He tucked the photograph carefully back into his wallet. "In a world full of curated images and viral moments, genuine connection has become rare. Last night was genuine. That's the difference I was talking about." Zach thought about this. "So it's not about becoming a concert pianist or anything?" "No. It's about remembering that beneath all the labels and expectations, we're just people with dreams and fears and hidden talents." Uncle Jungkook zipped up his bag. "That applies to you too, you know." "Me?" Zach looked up in surprise. "Yes, you." Uncle Jungkook smiled. "A week ago, you were terrified of being associated with me at school. Now look at you, backstage manager, confidant, connector." He gestured toward the door where May had exited. "You brought May into the picture and that made all the difference." Zach hadn't thought about it that way before. He had been so focused on his uncle's performance that he hadn't considered his own role in making it happen. "I guess I did help a little," he admitted. "More than a little." Uncle Jungkook checked his watch. "I need to head to the airport soon. Walk me out." Outside, as they waited for the car service to arrive, Uncle Jungkook gazed thoughtfully at the quiet suburban street. "You know," he said, "Theo's challenge turned out to be a gift in disguise." "How so?" Zach asked. "It forced me to reclaim a part of myself I'd forgotten," Uncle Jungkook replied. "And it showed me a side of my nephew I hadn't fully appreciated before." The car pulled up and Uncle Jungkook gave Zach a quick hug, something he rarely did. "Keep an eye on May," he said quietly. "She's going to need a good friend at that school." "I will," Zach promised. As the car drove away, Zach's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Theo. Tell your uncle thanks for the autograph. My dad's going to frame it. Zach smiled to himself. Maybe Uncle Jungkook wasn't the only one who had bridged worlds last night. Back inside, Zach found his mom watching one of the news clips about the talent show. Your uncle certainly knows how to make an impression, she remarked as he flopped onto the couch beside her. Yeah, Zach agreed. On screen, Uncle Jungkook was taking his final bow, the audience on their feet applauding wildly. The camera panned to show Zach and May in the front row, both beaming with pride. You know what's funny? Zach said. A week ago, I would have died of embarrassment if Uncle Jungkook had shown up at my school. Now, I can't wait for him to visit again. His mom smiled knowingly. People can surprise you when you give them the chance. Even famous uncles, Zach agreed, thinking of the photograph in Uncle Jungkook's wallet and the promise from long ago that had finally been fulfilled. What he didn't know yet was that the biggest surprise was still to come. Monday morning arrived with a strange new reality for Zach. As he walked through the school hallways, people who had never spoken to him before now smiled and waved. A group of 8th grade girls giggled when he passed. Even teachers gave him knowing nods. It's weird, Zach told May as they sat together at lunch. It's like I'm famous by association. That's how it works, May said, taking a bite of her sandwich. My mother used to teach famous musicians in Seattle. When people found out, they treated me differently too. Did you like it? Zach asked. May considered this. Not really. They weren't interested in me, just in who my mother knew. Zach nodded. That was exactly how he felt. Everyone wanted to talk about Uncle Jungkook, not about him. As if on cue, Mason slid onto the bench across from them, his eyes wide with excitement. Zach, have you checked your email today? No? Why? Principal Donovan sent a school-wide announcement. Your uncle's performance raised so much money from ticket sales and donations that they're creating a new music scholarship. They're calling it the Jungkook Young Artists Grant. Really? Zach looked at Maylee, who seemed equally surprised. It gets better, Mason continued. The announcement says the first recipient has already been chosen, someone who demonstrated exceptional musical insight in helping prepare for the talent show. He pointed at May. That's you, isn't it? May's face flushed. What? No, that can't be right. But after school, Principal Donovan confirmed it. She called May and Zach to her office, where Mrs. Chin was already waiting, tears in her eyes. The scholarship will cover private lessons, summer music camp, and a college fund earmarked for musical education, Principal Donovan explained. Mr. Jungkook was quite specific about the terms. But I didn't do anything special. May protested. According to Mr. Jungkook, you did, the principal replied, handing her an official-looking letter. He was quite impressed by your musical knowledge and your willingness to help. As they left the principal's office, May was quiet, staring at the letter in her hands. Are you okay? Zach asked. I don't know what to say, she whispered. This changes everything. With lessons and music camp, I could actually. She trailed off, seemingly afraid to voice her dreams. Could actually what? Zach prompted. Become a real musician someday, she finished. Not just a hobby, but a career. Mrs. Chin put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Your father always said music was a waste of time. But now, she smiled at Zach. Please thank your uncle for us. I will, Zach promised. That evening, as Zach did his homework, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? Zach? It's Uncle Jungkook. Uncle Jungkook. I was going to call you. May got the scholarship. She and her mom are so happy. And that's actually why I'm calling, Uncle Jungkook interrupted. There's something else I didn't tell you before I left. What's that? Zach asked. The performance at the talent show, it gave me an idea. A big one. Uncle Jungkook explained that he had spent the flight back to Seoul thinking about music, about Maestro Kim's words, and about the connection he had felt with the audience. I've decided to start a new foundation, he said. The Maestro Kim Music Initiative. It will fund music education in underserved communities, starting in Korea and expanding globally. Wow, Zach breathed. That's amazing. There's more, Uncle Jungkook continued. I'm organizing a benefit concert to launch the foundation. Professional musicians, corporate sponsors, the works. And he paused. I want you and May to help organize it. Us. Zach nearly dropped his phone. But we're just kids. Kids with good instincts about music and people, Uncle Jungkook replied. Besides, this is for students, so it should be guided by students. I'll have professionals handling the details, but I want your input on what would appeal to young people. Zach's mind raced with the possibilities. When is this happening? 8 weeks from now. I've already spoken with your mother, and she's agreed to let you miss some school if necessary. May's mother is on board too. The next few days were a whirlwind. News of the Maestro Kim Music Initiative spread throughout the school and town. Journalists called for interviews with the nephew who inspired an idol's musical revelation. Even Theo seemed impressed, asking Zach if there might be volunteer opportunities at the benefit concert. But the biggest surprise came on Thursday afternoon as Zach and May walked home from school. "I have something to tell you," May said, looking nervous. "My mother and I have been invited to visit Korea next month to meet with music schools there about the initiative." "That's fantastic," Zach exclaimed. "Yes, but..." May bit her lip. "Your uncle asked if you would come too. He said something about wanting you to meet someone important from his past." Zach stopped walking. "Someone from his past? In Korea?" "He didn't say who. Just that it was important and that we would understand everything when we got there." That night, Zach could hardly sleep, his mind filled with questions. Who did Uncle Jungkook want him to meet? What else was his famous uncle planning? And how had a simple talent show dare turned into something that might change lives around the world? As he finally drifted off to sleep, Zach thought about the photograph of young Jungkook and Maestro Kim. The words on the back, "Your hands will be needed again to bridge worlds and change hearts," seemed to have come true in ways no one could have predicted. 1 week later, Zach sat in his living room with his mom, Uncle Jungkook, who had flown in for the weekend, May, and Mrs. Jeon. They were reviewing plans for the benefit concert when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Uncle Jungkook said, rising from his chair. He opened the door to reveal an elderly man with kind eyes and a bright smile, a face Zach recognized immediately from the photograph. "Everyone," Uncle Jungkook said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'd like you to meet Maestro Kim." The old man stepped into the room, his eyes twinkling as they settled on Zach. "So this is the nephew who helped Jungkook find his hands again," he said in a warm, melodic voice. "It seems I have you to thank for fulfilling a promise 20 years in the making." As the elderly man extended his hand, Zach realized that the talent show had been just the beginning. The real performance, the one that mattered most, was still unfolding. Zach shook Maestro Kim's hand, amazed at how firm the elderly man's grip was despite his age. Up close, Maestro Kim's face was deeply lined, each wrinkle seemingly telling a story of its own. His eyes, however, were bright and alert, missing nothing. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," Zach said, suddenly feeling shy. "I've seen your picture." Maestro Kim smiled. "Ah, the famous photograph Jungkook carries everywhere, I'm told." He glanced at Uncle Jungkook, who looked uncharacteristically emotional. "Though I was much younger then, as was your uncle." Everyone gathered in the living room as Uncle Jungkook explained how he had tracked down his old teacher. Maestro Kim had retired from formal teaching years ago but had continued mentoring young musicians in Seoul. When Uncle Jungkook contacted him about the new music initiative, Maestro Kim had immediately agreed to help and to visit America for the first time. "I always knew Jungkook would touch many hearts," Maestro Kim told them, accepting a cup of tea from Zach's mom. "Even as a boy, his talent was extraordinary. But his hands..." He gestured expressively. His hands spoke with a sincerity that went beyond technique. "I knew that authenticity would resonate with people, whether on a concert stage or a stadium screen. I had no idea my uncle could play like that until last week," Zach admitted. Maestro Kim laughed, a rich, melodious sound. "Many talents can lie dormant, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Sometimes they need a little push." He looked pointedly at Zach. "Like a dare from a school bully, perhaps?" Zach's eyes widened. "You know about that?" "Jungkook has told me everything," Maestro Kim confirmed. "How you were embarrassed at first, then worried, then finally proud." His expression grew serious. "That journey from fear to pride is one many artists take. It is why art has power, it transforms not just the audience but the artist." Over dinner, Maestro Kim shared stories about young Jungkook in his studio, how he was initially shy and reluctant to play expressively, how he would practice scales long after the lesson ended, how he had a particular gift for infusing even simple exercises with emotion. The other students sometimes teased him for taking music too seriously, Maestro Kim recalled. But Jungkook never stopped. He had something to prove, perhaps to himself most of all. Listening to these stories, Zach saw his uncle in a completely new light, not as the global superstar everyone knew, but as a once awkward boy finding his voice through music. Not so different from Zach himself. After dinner, May shyly asked if Maestro Kim would play something for them. The old man's eyes twinkled. "Only if Jungkook will join me," he said. Uncle Jungkook seemed surprised but agreed. The two moved to the living room piano and, without sheet music, began a four-hand duet, a lively Korean folk song arrangement. Their hands moved in perfect synchrony, Maestro Kim's experienced fingers dancing alongside Uncle Jungkook's powerful, precise touch. The music filled the house with joy and nostalgia. When they finished, May asked about the piece. It is a song about perseverance, Maestro Kim explained. About finding joy in creation even when the path is difficult. He looked meaningfully at Uncle Jungkook. Some journeys take us to global stages. Others bring us back to the simple love of making music. Later that evening, as everyone was preparing for bed, Zack found his uncle and Maestro Kim sitting on the back porch talking quietly under the stars. "May I join you?" Zack asked. "Of course," Uncle Jungkook said, making room on the porch swing. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence looking up at the night sky. Then Maestro Kim spoke. "Your uncle tells me you have been invited to Korea." "Yes, sir," Zack replied. "For the music initiative." Maestro Kim nodded. "It is good to see where your roots are, even if they are not your own roots. It helps to understand the stories that made you. Is that why you came all this way?" Zack asked. "To see where Uncle Jungkook's life led him?" The old man smiled. "Partly. And partly to see if my words to him long ago came true. Your hands will be needed again to bridge worlds and change hearts. It seems they have in ways I never imagined." The next morning, plans were made. Maestro Kim would stay in America for 2 weeks, helping to shape the music initiative. Then everyone, Zack, his mom, Uncle Jungkook, May, and Mrs. Chin, would travel to Korea to visit the schools that would benefit from the program. As they discussed details, Zack noticed something remarkable. His uncle, usually focused and efficient, was listening intently to everyone's ideas, especially Maestro Kim's and May's. It was as if the music had changed something fundamental in him, or perhaps had simply revealed a side that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. When Theo texted later that day, asking if there was news about the initiative, Zack didn't hesitate. "Come over," he replied. "There's someone you should meet." The talent show trophy sat on a shelf, already gathering dust, but its impact continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could have foreseen, proving that sometimes the most important performances happen long after the applause has faded. 6 weeks later, Zack stood in a bright community music center in Busan, South Korea. The air hummed with the sound of young musicians tuning instruments and practicing scales. Behind him, a group of children from the local outreach program were rehearsing with May and Mrs. Chin for tomorrow's ceremony to officially launch the Maestro Kim Music Initiative. Their earnest, joyful playing filled the room. Uncle Jungkook approached, looking more at ease than Zack had ever seen him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, nodding toward the young musicians. "It's amazing," Zack agreed. "I can see why you wanted to start this here." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the children play. "I wanted to show you something," Uncle Jungkook said finally, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out not the familiar photograph Zack expected, but an old, worn notebook. "This belonged to Maestro Kim. He gave it to me yesterday." Zack accepted the notebook carefully. The cover was faded, the pages filled with neat musical notations and handwritten comments. Uncle Jungkook opened it to a marked page where elegant handwriting filled the margins. "This is an entry from 20 years ago," Uncle Jungkook explained. "The day after my last lesson before entering the trainee dorm." Zack read slowly, tracing the words with his finger. "Today, I said goodbye to young Jungkook. Such a remarkable boy, talented yet humble, driven yet kind. His hands carry something rare, not just skill, but soul. He does not simply play notes, he tells stories with his touch. I told him that someday his hands would be needed again to bridge worlds and change hearts. He did not understand, but he will. Music plants seeds that grow in unexpected seasons. I believe this boy will touch millions, whether with his voice, his hands, or his spirit. He will build bridges where others see only divisions. My hope is that he never forgets the music inside him, even as the world pulls him toward different stages." Zack looked up at his uncle, who was gazing at the young musicians. "He knew," Zack said softly. "Even then, he knew you'd be someone important." Uncle Jungkook nodded. "Not in the way most people think of importance, though. Not fame or records or awards. Maestro Kim measures importance by how many hearts you touch, how many dreams you nurture." He took the notebook back, handling it with reverence. "By his measure, he's far more important than I could ever be." "Is that why you started the music initiative?" Zack asked. "To be important in his way?" "Partly," Uncle Jungkook admitted. "And partly because seeing you and May these past weeks, how quickly you've connected with these children, how music bridges language and culture, it reminds me of what I experienced in Maestro Kim's studio." He gestured toward a young girl painstakingly practicing a simple melody. "Performances connect people across distances, but creating music together connects people across differences. We need both." As they walked toward the group, Maestro Kim emerged from a small practice room. Despite his age, he had been tireless during their visit, introducing them to local musicians, arranging workshops, telling stories about Korea's rich musical heritage. "Ah, there you are," he called. "The children want to show you something, Zach, a piece they've written specially for tomorrow." The children gathered around, suddenly shy but excited. With May's encouragement, they began to play a simple but joyful melody on an assortment of instruments. The music, though unpolished, radiated pure enthusiasm. As Zach listened, he suddenly understood something important. The photo Uncle Jungkook had carried all these years wasn't just a memento of his childhood. It was a reminder of a promise, not just Maestro Kim's promise that Jungkook's hands would be needed again, but a deeper promise about the power of sharing your true self with the world, whatever form that might take. Later that evening, as everyone gathered for dinner, Uncle Jungkook made an announcement. "I've been thinking about what comes next," he said. "The initiative is launched. Programs in 3 countries are already running. But there's something else I want to do." He looked at Zach, then at May. "You two have shown remarkable understanding, not just of music, but of how it connects people. So I'm establishing a youth ambassador program for the initiative. If you're interested, you travel during school breaks to different participating centers, helping students share their music with each other." May gasped. "Really? We could do that." "With your parents' permission, of course," Uncle Jungkook added, nodding to Mrs. Chin and Zach's mom. "But I'm not musical like May," Zach protested. Maestro Kim, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Music takes many forms, young man. Some speak through instruments. Others, like you, speak through bringing people together. That is its own kind of music." That night, as Zach lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened since that fateful career day, he realized what Maestro Kim meant. The talent show had never really been about Uncle Jungkook's piano skills. It had been about courage, connection, and rediscovering parts of yourself that had been set aside. Uncle Jungkook had found his hands again. May had found her confidence. And Zach, he had found a new way of seeing himself and his place in the world, not just as Jungkook's nephew, but as someone with his own unique role to play. The real revelation wasn't about hidden talents or viral videos or international initiatives. It was about the simple truth that sometimes the most important note in any song is the one that calls others to join in.